Let me show you how PIM really works. Let us say that Bob is trying to manage his company's Azure Active Directory and he should be assigned the global admin role. And instead of making him a permanent global admin in his tenant, you can make him eligible for that role. In normal conditions, he might not need to activate that role, but when he really needs to access the Azure portal, for example, and do some admin tasks that requires global admin role, he goes through a role activation process first. In the role activation process, you might require him to do multi-factor authentication to prove his identity, or even start a workflow approval process. Only when he passes those role activation checks, he can activate his global admin role. This role activation can also trigger an alert to other people in your organization, since activating a global admin role requires attention. Now, after Bob activates his global admin role, he becomes a global admin for a period of time that you specify in advance for that role. This can be 4 hours, for example. After 4 hours, Bob will no longer hold that global admin role and will become only eligible for that role again. Azure PIM helps your organization in many ways. It helps you discover and see which users are assigned privileged roles in your environment. Remember this. Detection is as important as protection, because being able to detect who has admin access is the first step to acting on them later. Now that you know who has been assigned to different roles, you need to apply the concept of just-in-time access, so that users are eligible for privileged role and they need to elevate and activate their roles only when needed. And for the rest of time, they have regular user privileges. They also need to go through a process to elevate their rights, like requiring an MFA or a workflow approval. Remember also that their privileged role will expire after a period of time. Moreover, you get a history of admin activations and you will be able to track when specific roles get activated and who get added or removed from a privileged role. You can also see all changes admin made to Azure resources so that you can track changes made across your Azure resources. Alerting is another key benefit because you get alerts about changes in admin assignment. And finally, you can review membership of admin roles and require users to provide justification for continued membership. This becomes handy for auditing and compliance purposes. When it comes to implementing PIM, keep in mind that there are the technical details of how to configure and enable PIM in your tenant, and there is the ongoing process that you should have in place to apply PIM concepts and deal with privileged access. This is not just a side activity that you done once and forget about, but rather an ongoing process to discover and protect privileged access and quickly respond to business needs. Also, you want to ensure that you do not get into a situation where you could be locked out of the administration of your Azure AD tenant. What you should do right away is to create emergency access accounts, at least 2 of them, for emergency or break glass situations. You might be familiar with the term break glass. Break glass is a term that refers to a quick means for a person who does not have access during emergency to gain such access. So, after you enable PIM, you should create at least 2 emergency accounts. These accounts should only be used for break glass situations, and they should not be assigned to individual users. So the question I want to help you answer is, when would you use these emergency accounts? We talked about just-in-time access where users are eligible for a role and they need to activate that role before getting privileges. With Azure resources, this eligibility can expire so that a user can be eligible for a role only for a period of time, 2 weeks for example. During those 2 weeks, an eligible admin can activate his role anytime. Now, what if you want to give someone a role in Azure resources for a period of time, say 2 weeks, but without the need for activation? In such scenario, the user is always active in his role with a clear start and end time. This is what time-bound access is all about. While just-in-time access requires activation before using a role, time-bound access does not require activation at all. In fact, the role is assigned and will expire at a certain time in the future. Let me show you a couple of differences between just-in-time access and time-bound access. Reviewers then get an email where they can approve or deny review for access. But the great thing about this is that you can ask them to show and justify why they actually need a global administrator, for example. Now, once the review access completes, a couple of notifications are sent out. So you can notify yourself or a couple of other users, and you have several options here where you can either just download a report and do an audit, and you don't have any actions to perform, or you can make it a monthly reoccurrence depending on the audit or business need. You can also enforce access review results by removing users from role assignments if this is what you want. Once you know who needs access to what roles, and with time, the role assignment becomes stale and perhaps privileged access is not needed anymore. For example, this could be that you gave someone a global admin role for the duration of a project, and that project ended. Or if the person who you assigned a privileged role to changed his role in the organization, and he does not need access anymore. In this demo, we are going to explore just-in-time access settings. I will also make one of the existing global admin roles eligible for that role instead of having permanent access. And finally, we will see how that user can activate his global admin role using PIM. Now, under Azure Resource Roles, you can see eligible roles, active roles, and expired roles. Let me go now to Azure AD Directory Roles under the Manage section, where I can configure the global admin role settings. As a PIM admin, I get to see the admin view and my view. Let me click on the admin view to see all Azure AD role assignments in this tenant. Scrolling down, we can see more details about all assignments per role. Let me go next to Settings to configure role assignments. From there, I will go to the roles so we can see all Azure AD directory roles. What we are looking for is the global admin role. Here we can define the maximum activation duration in hours. We can use the slider or type something in the text box.